When did that, like what, in what period of time?
What is going on in the San Francisco backfield, bro?
Where was this like a week ago?
I would bet the house that Brandon Aiyuk sees 10 plus targets next week. I would bet the house that Trey Sermon sees 20 plus touches next week.
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
Maybe the greatest catch I've ever seen.
I mean, we're, not 90 minutes before kickoff, and like out of nowhere, it's, Trey Sermon's a healthy scratch. You're like, what? You're like, where did this come from? Like, I don't understand. Like, I thought he was having a good camp. There was no negative reports about Trey Sermon. Maybe a little bit, like Raheem Mostert's outplayed him, but that's okay. Raheem Mostert's an explosive player too.
Right. Good back.
But yeah, exactly. Then out of nowhere, it's like, oh no, we're going with Raheem Mostert, JaMychal Hasty, and some rando 6th-round guy that we've never heard of. Like, what is going on in the San Francisco backfield, bro?
After the game, Kyle Shanahan says, and like beat reporters started to kind of say this as he was clearly going to be like a healthy scratch or whatever. Like, oh yeah, Trey Sermon had lost his grip on the starting spot, and had been usurped by usurped by JaMychal Hasty and Elijah Mitchell. And it's like, when did that, like what, in what period of time, right? Like we were on this show talking about Trey Sermon taking 10 of 12 snaps with the first team offense in preseason, getting passing game work, getting gassed up about that. It's like, yeah, nobody would have told you to draft freaking Trey Sermon in the mid rounds if we had known he wasn't even in contention to get playing time. Now, obviously, then Elijah Mitchell goes out and just slaughters the Detroit Lions.
Smashes. Yeah.
James, I again, I have to ask you, do you know Elijah Mitchell's 40 time?
No clue.
Or hey, let me tell you what, you should. It's a 4.38, buddy. He's a fast guy. Oh. He's kind of see, he perked up, ladies and gentlemen. He's legitimately like a pretty explosive guy. He was on a few radars. He's not a complete like Jeff Wilson came out of nowhere for this team last year. They did at least draft this player in the same draft that they took Trey Sermon, which is a little weird. Like, I mean, it's just the Trey Sermon thing is odd. And then obviously like Raheem Mostert goes out. I feel so bad for Raheem Mostert, right? Because just can't stay on the field, I guess. Out for 8 weeks with the knee cartilage situation.
And you know what that means? It's like that. The 8 weeks is probably like the season. I mean, let's be real. When we're talking about Mostert at this point. I mean, the crazy thing too. It's like what, he had 2 touches for 20 yards. You're like, God, geez, like
this is happening.
This is what this guy does. You know what I mean?
Yeah, big runs and then out of there. But then Elijah Mitchell takes over, and then he obviously has a huge game against this Lions defense. This is my read on the situation. Number one, we can't drop Trey Sermon. Not yet, right? No. Like if we go like 5 weeks and he hasn't played, 3 weeks and he hasn't played, obviously then we've long since moved on. But now that like I was going back and forth with my boss at Yahoo on Sunday, and it's like, it's crazy that Trey Sermon could go from being inactive to like a top 15 play next week. It's like well within the range of outcomes. I mean, obviously the matchup is not as good. It's not as good as what it would have been obviously against the Lions, but still. So we have to go ahead and say though, like for folks that want to like know, we have to assume right now that Elijah Mitchell's the top back on the depth chart. That is what we have to operate in that reality, because that is what we saw last week.
First of all, here's the thing. Let's hit the Brandon Aiyuk thing. And then I will get into my crazy wild tinfoil hat conspiracy theory thing.
Oh jeez. Okay.
And then we'll go on. All right. So Brandon Aiyuk. What the fuck, dude?
There's nothing else to say except what the fuck, right? Like, I mean, I had that face on sorry to the kids out there. I had that face on there just all like the early part of Sunday, because again, like we've got some 49ers beat writers coming out, right after it's like, oh, Trenton Sherfield is playing ahead of friggin' Brandon Aiyuk. And it's like, yeah, well, he had been like Trenton Sherfield had a good camp, like Brandon Aiyuk has fallen behind. It's like, where was this? I'm like freaking out my dogs in here at this point. It's like, where was this like a week ago, Aiyuk runs 15 routes, which is third on the team. He did eventually end up playing more than Trenton Sherfield, so there is that. But obviously, no targets, no catches, nothing for Brandon Aiyuk.
Nothing.
No. I saw you for DirecTV. You had a video where it's like, we'd love to show you some footage here, but you just have to look at me because there's no footage of Brandon Aiyuk doing anything. So that is just what it is. But he was out there doing some punts. This one I think is easier to explain because Shanahan did at least come out and say, yeah, he just got back from a hamstring injury. He's only been out. He's only been back a week. We're just kind of taking it slow or whatever with him. And I mean, the 49ers would be nice. It would be nice if they didn't just have guys falling down left and right because they overwork them because of injury. So I do this one, I actually am not I'm not panicking at all about Brandon Aiyuk. We're just going to wait for him to get healthy. They obviously like Trenton Sherfield. That's fine, but they still ended up playing Aiyuk, more than Sherfield in terms of routes run on passing plays. So he got the decoy treatment. It happens. We dust it off. And basically, though, I think with Aiyuk, you don't do anything with him. You probably have to just sit him until he, is running a full complement of routes and is up to speed or whatever. But that's about it. That's all you got to do.
I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing with Trent Sherfield that is just hilarious to me. The Arizona Cardinals run more 4 wide receiver sets than anyone in the NFL.
Yeah.
Trent Sherfield was not good enough to be a wide receiver on the Cardinals. Okay, fine. They need a lot of wide receivers in Arizona, and in a team that needs a lot of wide receivers, Trent Sherfield was not good enough to be on that squad. I think this guy ran a 4.45 42. I think he's actually pretty fast.
Yeah.
I'd have to look that up again. Don't quote me on that, but I do think he had a good 40 time. Yeah. But when you look at the snap share, okay, you could talk about routes run or whatever it is. That's fine. But I mean, you look at the snap share, Trent Sherfield played 50% of the snaps. Brandon Aiyuk played about 48% of the snaps or whatever it was. And then Deebo Samuel's just out there, 84% of the time. And it's just kind of like, who is the guy with the injury history again? Deebo is playing 85% of the snaps. What's going on here? I really don't understand. And here's the, I'm actually not panicking on either player of either Trey Sermon or Brandon Aiyuk. And again, I will give you my crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. I think Shanahan came into this game against Detroit and said, this team is garbage. I think Detroit is absolute garbage, dumpster fire. I could beat Dan Campbell with my freaking eyes closed. All right.
Yeah.
I ain't worried about Dan Campbell and these Lions. I think he comes in and does all this weird, Shanahan again type things just to mess with his own team and to also mess with the NFL. Right. So that when he goes into when they take on Philadelphia in a much more competitive matchup, now he's got to be thinking now Philadelphia's got to be thinking, okay, well, now we have to game plan for Trent Sherfield. Now we got a game plan for Mitchell. Now we got a game plan for JaMychal Hasty. And I think, and again, I'm basing this off of absolutely nothing. I'm just saying, I think that Kyle is absolutely messing with his own guys. I think he doesn't want Trey Sermon to get ahead of himself. Which is why he never talked up Trey Sermon in this offseason, despite the fact that they moved up in the draft to go get Trey Sermon. And then this whole Brandon Aiyuk thing, it's you can't tell me, Matt, you cannot convince me that it was not part of the game plan to literally not target Brandon Aiyuk. Literally. You cannot convince me of that. This guy's out there 50% of the time, you could talk about the routes run or whatever. Okay, so he's running routes. But they're not targeting him.
Yeah.
Stop it. You're telling me that they're not even looking his direction in this game. It's crazy. It's madness to me. And so you can't tell me that it wasn't on purpose that they were trying to not throw Brandon Aiyuk the ball. It is literally impossible for this man to have not seen one damn target in this game.
You could actually say it's not even just messing with his own players, but creating the environment of a meritocracy and that you earn what you get.
Exactly.
Here, you know what that kind of coaching thing. And I think that you look at that too, part of what Kyle Shanahan said after the game in his press conference was Brandon Aiyuk, he leads with Brandon Aiyuk has a hamstring injury. He had just gotten back. Like, we wanted to kind of take it slow, blah, 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 blah. So that all kind of said, and then he said, but, Trenton Sherfield had earned the right to be out there. Not like earned the right to be my starting receiver, whatever. Like, all the people who are like, thanks for, and there are a few, like, thanks for Brandon Aiyuk, whatever. It's like, make sure you, I want to see you at the end of the season. Like, make sure to report back to these mentions, these YouTube comments. Yes. At the end of the season.
I'm collecting receipts, baby. I'm collecting them receipts.
Well, I mean, I'm not coming back for you because I got a life. But again, it creates that meritocracy situation where it's like, yeah, Trenton Sherfield had a good camp or whatever, so he got to play while we're taking it slow with Brandon Aiyuk. Maybe Elijah Mitchell, JaMychal Hasty has had a good camp and whatever. So that I totally I don't even think that's a conspiracy theory. I think that's a very like valid football reason of why this might have happened this way. And he just didn't, he has no incentive to report it to the press. So it just didn't happen.
No.
Because, James, we want to be fair and balanced. And we'll give we'll do a full Elijah Mitchell thing here in a second before we move on to like really just hard and fast. Like, this is what you need to do with waivers. But Evan Anderson does point this out. And this is why this is, I think, freaking people out a little bit, is because we've seen this movie before in the running back room, and we've seen this movie before in the wide receiver room. Like, running back that Shanahan stands on the table for and says, hey, I want this guy. Like, we got to get this guy. Peter King, write a whole damn profile about how I wanted Joe Williams. So we took Joe Williams, a guy who John Lynch didn't even have on his draft board. And Joe Williams is like never a thing. Yeah. So that I think is like, oh, they traded for Trey Sermon. Well, I guess maybe just Kyle Shanahan blew it on this one too. We've seen Kyle Shanahan like sour on guys and pop them out the door and never think about him again before. So I think that's what has people really freaked out about this. I'm totally confident in Brandon Aiyuk, like, going forward, not worried about that at all. I think the running back position is a more interesting question, to the point that if it's me, I want to roster Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell. Like, I want to figure out a way to do that. I want to figure out a way to have these guys both on my team. Like, I believe in Trey Sermon still, but I also would like to hedge with Elijah Mitchell just on the fact that I'm wrong. And he also too, like, we were interested in Raheem Mostert and Trey Sermon. Why should we not be interested in both? Now Elijah Mitchell sort of as another fast guy in the Raheem Mostert spot.
How much do you want to bet in week number 2 against Philadelphia? How much do you want to bet Brandon Aiyuk is going to see 15 targets and Trey Sermon's going to get like 25 carries? How much you want to bet, man? Like, I'm betting the house that there's a madness, like just a crazy overcorrection in week 2. Because again, it's like, I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, there is just no way this is developing as like, unless it's like an orchestrated thing where they know they can. And by the way, they did do this. They took these rando backups and they absolutely slaughtered Detroit. Detroit made a crazy comeback at the end, but this, like, at that point, the game was ridiculously it was buried. It's in the dirt. Like, no one cared.
I would say for like people who have fab bids, whatever, like, I would be pretty aggressive with Elijah Mitchell, because I think there's a chance he could change your season, right? Like, let's say Trey Sermon never gets out of the doghouse. That is possible. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. Right. Then Elijah Mitchell just has the 1A role all to himself. At worst, I think he's going to be the 1B in this backfield. Like, stone worst, I think he's 1B in this backfield. And I don't know that how many better backs on the waiver wire are you going to find than a 1B in a Shanahan offense? I don't know. Not very many.
Yeah. No, not many. And again, like, let's say this was Trey Sermon, Raheem Mostert. And so now Elijah Mitchell just literally just steps in and takes the Mostert role. Well, we just got done with drafts, man. Mostert was going in the 6th round. So like, what's the price that you would pay to pick up a 6th round draft pick off of waiver wires? Like, that's the calculation you need to figure out in your own head. And I know people write this all the time, like, oh, I would spend 7 to 15% or whatever of my, fab budget on X player. You know what, man? Like, I find that is not that effective because every league is so goddamn different. How many teams are in your league? What's the roster setup like? Is it a 2 running back thing with like 1 flex? Is it 2 running backs with 2 flexes? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just the roster setups are just so different. How desperate are teams for running backs? Like, what kind of league you play in. we're 8 of the first 10 picks running backs in your league. Guess what? Elijah Mitchell's going for a lot. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, man. Like, you have to know your league settings and you have to know your league mates, but understand, you're trying to get a 5th, 6th round pick off the waiver wire. So that's going to require a pretty chunky portion of your fab. That's kind of where I would stand with that.